I'm with Love Hudson Maggio, who is the president and co-founder of Mardat. Now, Love, you have a really amazing mission with this business that I think a lot of people will benefit from. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment?
Absolutely. So at Mardat, our whole purpose is around simplifying the message. GDPR, lots of legislation, lots of language, lots of articles, very complicated for a lot of people. And so our mission is just basically to clarify it, make it very simple, and help CEOs and CIOs and marketing organizations and agencies understand their responsibility, what the law means, interpret it, and then start thinking through their use cases. You know, how would this apply to us? What data are we collecting? How are we using it? You know, how can we communicate with our customers?
I think that's great, because what we've heard over the last year, maybe a little longer, is it's really complicated. There's not enough guidance out there. We don't know where to start.
And so that's kind of my job, is to curate all the information out there and help articulate that in a very simple way, and then help, you know, companies establish roadmaps, real plans, put those in place step by step on what to do, and then have them think about their organization and what resources they need to lean into to execute.
Now, you said about how you make that plan achievable. Here are the steps to go do it. Because it feels a lot like people have gone, yeah, we've bought a product or we've put a policy in place, we're good.
Right. So, I mean, it's one thing to think about, you know, a roadmap. It's another thing to execute on it. It's another thing to have tabletop exercises so that kind of role playing. What happens if a consumer comes and says, I want to exercise my right to be forgotten? What's your process and procedure? You know, a lot of organizations will immediately run to their data processor, say they have a DMP or something like that. They'll go to their data processor, they're like, what do? I got a request. And the data processor's response is, well, that's a plan that you have to establish. We can make recommendations to you, but it's up to you and your legal team to determine what to do. And it's also your job to figure out what resources are going to execute. So the time to know what to do and how to handle exercising consumers' rights, it's not when they make the request. You need to know that ahead of time. So my job is to kind of help them think through some of those steps and think about who's actually going to execute on it, because there are timelines that are, you know, established. You can't have a consumer request it and you wait 6 months in order to make it happen. And I also believe that it's really, really important for organizations to bring in their legal team very early. So when the consumer has contacted the organization and wants to exercise one of their rights, get legal involved, not from, you know, a perspective of a threat, but more to keep the communications open, to document those communications, keep people accountable and responsible, and keep these requests time bound. So I think it's really important to bring your legal team in really, really early in the process.
Now, we have heard of some quite large organizations who haven't been meeting those timelines. Is that something you've seen?
I have some of the very large global companies, and it's not because they don't want to, it's like they don't really know what to do. There's so many moving parts. I think one of the hardest things for organizations, especially global organizations that I've seen, is just trying to figure out what data are we collecting. So in the marketing division, they know what they're collecting, they know what data they're using and what personas they have and what attributes go into those personas, and they understand all of that. But then, you know, your IT team, your CR, where your CRM is housed, you may have subscription data. There's a number of different factors. So you have to know where all the data is. So if the customer asks to be forgotten, just as an example, then you got to know where do I go? Where do I find it? And that could take time. Whereas if you kind of thought through that, you had a plan in place, you thought about all the different rights and what you need to do and who you need to contact, you're not scrambling.
And I think there's a conception that, you know, everything has to go, but actually, you know, what does have to go and what can stay? Is that something you're seeing companies don't understand?
I think a lot of companies are wrapping their head around it. I think the one really good thing that's happening is that now they're hiring different individuals, you know, DPOs and more legal and outside consulting, working with their agencies. Agencies are becoming more versed on the subject as well. I work with agency partners so that they understand some of the implications, because initially what was going on that I saw with a lot of my global customers is immediately when GDPR showed up, they're like, oh my gosh, I need to stop doing marketing. I could get a fine. I don't want that to happen. I can't afford it. And so they were slowing down on doing some of their marketing, their branding, and their acquisition campaigns because they were just in a panic. Well, there's no need to panic. You just need to be better versed on it. And your agency partners need to understand as well. It needs to be a continual cycle of education. I think education is the most important thing. Organization needs to understand what needs to happen, have legal come in, consultants come in, and then align on what your data privacy policy is. Make sure that you have those consents in place. Make sure you have those processes in place on how you're going to execute when the consumer reaches out. And then make sure that you can find a way to communicate directly with the consumers so they get a sense of ease, like, I am going to do everything I can. I want to establish your trust. I want you to understand the data that I'm using is for X purpose, and you have the right to agree to that or not.
And are you seeing a sense from consumers that they care about that they want to exercise that right, that they want to know what companies are doing, or do you think convenience overtakes it?
Well, I think convenience is a little bit, it's overtaking it, but I think a lot of people are silently want to do it, but maybe it takes too long and they're just rather just get to whatever program they want or whatever offer they want. And so a lot of times you just see them clicking yes and agreeing a very high percentage of the time. But I think that's going to change because some of the things that are happening outside with the cybersecurity and the hacking have raised consciousness. And I think you're going to see more and more people exercise their rights with anything else, right? Up until this point, they didn't know they had rights. Now they know they have rights and they're thinking, maybe I should affirm these rights. What does that mean? Will I be, penalized? I think a lot of them are afraid of being penalized. Mm-hmm. If I, say I want to be forgotten or I want access to the data that you've been collecting, does that mean that I don't get my coupon, my offer, the program that I want to watch? I don't want to, be tied down from streaming the show that I want to see. I want to see Game of Thrones now. I don't want you to hold me back from that. And time is always a factor as well. So I think as people understand more the implications that there's not going to be a penalty for that, I think they'll start exercising their rights. And I think companies will realize how important it is to build that trust and that relationship. They'll keep those open communications. It's not us and them. It's a we, right? Because data privacy is about everybody.
Yeah. As we look forward to the coming 12 months, do you think we're going to see more of that, or what trends do you think are going to come through?
Great question. I think as we move towards our second year in GDPR, I think you're going to see more consumers become more aware. They're going to educate themselves more. There's a lot of questions out there now. There's a lot of open forums around that. Lots of seminars and conferences, things online, some true, some false, and people are just going to have to dig through, some of the material to kind of come up with some of those truths. I think you're going to see organizations, and I've seen that right now with the clients that I work with, they're working more on putting those policies together, understanding the rights, and figuring out how to communicate and align themselves with the customer. So it's not, you're on one side of the fence, I'm on the other. How do we, walk through this together and get what we both want and need out of the relationship? So I think that's going to be more of what you see in the upcoming year. And I think the GDPR is also going to get a little bit clear because there's a couple of the, interpretations of different regulations that have people a little fuzzy and confused. And so I think there's going to be more clarity on that. And that's needed. And people are going to start thinking about their own use cases and discussing that with their legal department, procurement, IT, marketing agencies, data vendors, that kind of thing.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for talking with us this morning.
I appreciate it. Thank you.